There are a few different ways to approach change in your life, and by far the most popular is the brute force method. And usually we know how that ends. The method that I prefer when it comes to change is acceptance-based change. So actually starting from a place of deep acceptance, which is very confusing because it seems like the polar opposite of what you should do. If you want to change, shouldn't you actively disapprove of the part of yourself that you want to change? No. And I want to talk about it in today's podcast episode. Welcome to Grow with Intention, the podcast of people who want to create a life that feels good. So there's a fable about the king and his messenger. The king says to the messenger, hey, I want you to go out and I want you to search for the worst thing in the world. And then I want you to bring it on back to me. The messenger leaves, comes back in a few days, and he is empty-handed. And the king's like, what's going on? Where is the worst thing in the world? The messenger pokes out his tongue and quickly follows it up by saying, my tongue is the worst thing in the world. My tongue can start wars. My tongue can cause hurt. My tongue can break hearts. My tongue can spread evil. My tongue is surely the worst thing in the world. And the king's satisfied and he says, very well, go out and find me the best thing in the world. Sends the messenger off. A few days later, the messenger comes back. And once again, he is empty-handed and he sticks out his tongue. The king's like, what is going on? You said that your tongue was the worst thing in the world. How could it possibly be the best thing in the world? And the messenger responds and he's like, my tongue is actually also the best thing in the world. It can spread words of love, words of kindness. It can actually stop wars and it can spread the word of God. It can speak words of poetry and beautiful words of affirmation. The king was happy, sent the messenger on his way. Usually the story is shared, I reckon, probably in a religious context, and it's shared to say, watch your words. I want to talk about how viewing your traits, kind of like the tongue, is one way to approach acceptance-based change. So when I interviewed Ellen Langer, she spoke about this activity that she did with a bunch of people where she had on one side of a piece of paper a bunch of positive attributes and she got people to circle the attributes about themselves that they really loved and valued. And then on the other side of the paper, she actually put the negative opposite version of those traits. So for example, flexibility or spontaneity, positive, wonderful. If you want to view them in their worst light, you could say impulsivity. You could say inconsistency even. And on this side of the piece of paper, she was like, circle the things about yourself that you've always wanted to change, that you really maybe don't like about yourself. Nearly everyone circled traits about themselves that they loved that also happened to match the negative opposite that they were so desperate to change. And often when we have maybe difficult attributes about ourselves, we treat them like they are just these horrible, bad parts that just need to be gotten rid of when actually they serve us in so many ways. These difficult attributes that we have almost always, when used in the right context, when used in the appropriate amount, are very helpful for us. It's just when they're used in maybe the wrong context, maybe with an inappropriate amount, that's when they're less helpful. Write down a list of the traits that you struggle with about yourself the most, and then write down their positive opposite. How do those traits actually serve you? Because almost always those traits are serving you. And until you can kind of appreciate the function of those traits, it's going to be really hard for you to manage them and help them to shine in the best and most helpful way for you. Because I guarantee your most difficult traits have ways in which they shine that are helping you, or that could be helping you. At the end of every podcast episode, I do Recs of the Week, where I give you recommendations to help you to dive deeper into today's podcast topic. The first Rec of the Week has to be the dark side of light chasers. That's where I found the tongue and the king story from. So good. I will say though, I don't agree with everything in this book. Please don't read this book thinking that I am ticking off everything in it. But I do think it's worth giving a read if you're interested in shadow work in any way, which is kind of what this podcast is about. I would also recommend a book called Existential Kink. Once again, I don't really agree with everything in this book, but some of the ideas in it you'll find helpful if you liked this podcast episode. I appreciate you so much. And my last recommendation is the shadow work course on intention. This little course is so good and it gives you so many practical shadow work exercises similar to what I've talked about in this podcast episode. I didn't directly call anything shadow work, but this is kind of shadow work, acceptance-based change. It all kind of goes hand in hand. I appreciate you so much and I'll see you soon.